You are listening to the Outside the Boards podcast. I'm Danny O'Leary. For most of my professional career, I have worked in mainstream sports for some of the world's leading sports organizations and properties and blue chip brands, helping to create award-winning omni-channel marketing campaigns, result-driven sales strategies, and impactful brand building initiatives. But all that work doesn't compare to the fun, excitement, and challenges I've been fortunate to experience working for the king of all sports, polo. For nearly a decade, I've put my heart and ambition into helping advance the sport of polo. I've made lifelong friendships, met some incredible people, traveled to memorable polo destinations, and heard the craziest stories. My goal is to share these people, places, and stories with you and provide a unique behind-the-scenes perspective of the game that breaks all the common stereotypes, all while discussing key issues affecting the sport today and the constructive sharing of ideas, insights, solutions, and best case studies for the purpose of advancing polo globally. Every week, I will have honest conversations with polo industry leaders, enthusiasts, and awe-inspiring people who make this sport great and fun to be around. I hope through their knowledge and their unique perspectives, they will motivate and inspire you. Together, we will explore ways you can make small tweaks to boost your polo business, whether you are a club, event, team, or player, that will amount to big changes in revenue, participation, attendance, and exposure. Saddle up. Welcome to Outside the Boards with me, Daniel O'Leary. Hi everyone, Danny O'Leary here, and welcome to Season 2 of the Outside the Boards podcast. Hope everyone is safe and healthy this fall. It is mid-November and we are heading into the holiday season. I hope most of you are planning big Thanksgivings to make up for a dismal 2020. I know I am. On this episode of Outside the Boards, I'm super excited about my guest, Miss Sheryl Sick. Sheryl is the embodiment of a polo player spirit. When she is not on horseback swinging a mallet or managing the Pacific Northwest as a USPA circuit governor, Sheryl is finding other ways for the wind to blow through her hair. Whether that is scaling a mountain, shredding the slopes on snowboard, or fly fishing, Sheryl is a vibrant outdoors woman and weekend warrior traveling the globe with friends and family seeking out adventure. Sick's Instagram account is a vivid expression of her wanderlust, showcasing trips to idyllic polo destination and adventurous excursions around the world. By trade, a technology sales executive rooted in Seattle, Washington, Sick intentionally aligned her career path to suit her polo lifestyle, enabling her the freedom to pursue her passion while growing professionally. Assuming the responsibility of circuit governor unexpectedly after the passing of her good friend Robert Peterson in 2017, Sick has immersed herself into the polo community, spending the summers traveling across the circuit's 7 states and Canada, visiting and playing at as many clubs as possible. Sheryl is an intercollegiate polo alumni from Washington State University and has competed nationwide and around the world, including Canada, Argentina, Ireland, Jamaica, and Mexico. Now with horses of her own, based out of Seattle Polo and Equestrian Center in Enumclaw, Washington, she enjoys an active schedule of polo adventures year-round. I'm honored to call Sheryl my friend. She is one of my favorite people in the polo world. As an outdoorsman myself, I enjoy living vicariously through her adventures on Instagram. She has a beautiful spirit and a hunger for life. I'm excited to see her continue to do great things for the sport and women's polo and see where her adventures take her next. So let's get started, everyone. Enjoy. Sheryl Sick, wonderful to have you. Believe it or not, I actually wanted you to be on season 1, but the schedule filled up pretty quickly. You know, you and I actually met for the first time, I think it was in 2018, 2019, when the USPA fall meetings were here in Oak Brook.
Yeah, I think so.
Bob McMurtry introduced us to each other. And so you and Pamela Flanagan are probably the youngest governors with the United States Polo Association. But I got to be honest, I am a huge fan of your Instagram profile. I think I live vicariously through your outdoor activities, and I'm very, very jealous. But in my opinion, I think you're a fantastic ambassador and influencer to the sport. I think you encompass very, very well how polo is a very outdoor recreational sport, and you yourself are an outdoors woman. I would love to get into that, but I'm thrilled to have you on this podcast, Sheryl. So thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you, Danny. I'm certainly happy to be here, and I think it's great to have multiple voices in the polo community to share perspectives. So certainly excited to chat with you today.
Yeah. And so you are the Pacific Northwest Circuit Governor, right?
That is correct. Yes.
Got it. Tell us a little bit about the Pacific Northwest. How many clubs, players you got going up there in your corner of the United States?
We have about 20 clubs in the Pacific Northwest region, and the region is pretty expansive as far as geography. It encompasses all of Western Canada, which includes Vancouver, Victoria, BC, all the way to Calgary and Grand Prairie. And then in the United States territories, it's Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. So a lot of ground to cover within the region, but it's a great circuit. It feels like a true circuit in the sense of the word, that a lot of the clubs in the Washington and Oregon and Canada regions do a lot of travel amongst each other, supporting each other's tournaments. And then that's been kind of the case for many, many years, partly because at one time there just weren't enough people at individual clubs to sustain playing with each other all summer. So there is a true circuit up here in the Northwest.
And not to mention, you probably have the circuit with the best view after naming all of those states. No question about it.
I'm definitely biased of that for sure.
Road trips have got to be pretty amazing.
Yeah, they are pretty amazing. We have several mountain ranges, many mountain passes that we go over with trucks and trailers and horses, and traveling around the circuit to get to a tournament for a weekend, and all sorts of different weather patterns, climates, you name it. But we do have some of the prettiest views for sure in all the land, I think, in the United States.
Now, you said you have 20 clubs overall, right? That's just 20 USPA sanctioned clubs. Is there additional private fields and other facilities that might not be sanctioned?
Sure, absolutely. Those are USPA clubs that are encompassing of that list, but there are a handful of private fields that are pretty open to other players outside of that location. But yeah, there's a handful of private fields in between Canada and Washington and Oregon.
And between all those clubs, what are you guys looking at in terms of number of players?
I think at last count, I think we were around between the 20 clubs, it's just under 300 registered players. So that's registered with the USPA, and that fluctuates depending on the time of the year based on USPA registrations. Mm-hmm. It's right around that ballpark. Some clubs, might have 8 people as full-time playing members with horses. And then you've got clubs like Calgary and down in Wyoming, Sheridan Bighorn and Jackson Hole that have much more substantial size of membership.
Got it. What are the levels that you have? Obviously, you have your local amateur Margarita League kind of thing. What are you guys playing up to?
So typically we're playing in the Washington, Western Canadian circuit, Washington, Oregon, Western Canada. That would probably be anywhere around 0 to 6 goal, including Margarita type leagues. And that varies. Sometimes it's been 0, 3, and 6 goal type things. Sometimes it's been 2, 4, and 6 goal, just depending on who's put their teams together and what that looks like regionally. And then when you get into the bigger clubs, they're playing a little bit higher level of polo. I know Flying H, I think they're in upwards around 12 to 14 goal when they're running full bore in the summertime, as well as Calgary.
And is the Pacific Northwest season pretty much the summer exclusively, or are you guys kind of hosting 2 seasons? What does that look like?
It's primarily summer. Depending on the area that you're in, I would say we typically run mid-June through mid-September. It all depends on the rain. So if you're in Washington and Oregon, we like to say summer starts July 5th because it's always a bit unpredictable with the weather. Mm-hmm. So most of our big tournaments usually kick off around July 4th weekend and then go through September. If you go on the other side of the mountains in the more kind of dry, high desert areas like Spokane, and up into Alberta and Wyoming, they can get started a little bit earlier, but it's typically June through September. So it's a 1-season deal. And then most of the players move from going to either California, Houston, or Florida.
Got it. You're almost identical to Chicago. I mean, our primary season's end of June through September. And it's kind of hit or miss. Sometimes you'll have the rainy season in June, and some years it'll be dry, and sometimes that rainy season will come into and hit you in September. The lake effect down here in Chicago is so lumpy that it can be fairly unpredictable. Out here, we have 7 USPA clubs. You'll have days where it's raining, and at a club that's 20 miles west of you won't even hit you at your club. an event is canceled and they know they can go play 10 or 20 miles away at another club because the rain didn't hit them.
Right. That's a nice weather halo.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be frustrating, that's for sure. Now, tell us a little bit about your club. So you're with the Seattle Polo and Equestrian Club, right? And how do you pronounce that city in Washington?
My home base is Seattle, Washington. And then my home base club is the Seattle Polo and Equestrian Center. And it's located in Enumclaw, Washington, which is about 50 minutes southeast of the city.
Enumclaw. Okay.
Enumclaw, yes. And I may be corrected, but I believe it means something in the realm of lightning or thunder in Native American tongue. It is on the plateau of the Cascade Mountain Range. So it's a lot of flat land and then a lot of mountainous land directly to the east. And we have a beautiful view of Mount Rainier, which is a 14,400 foot glaciated inactive volcano. So that's pretty cool to see. And yeah, so I keep my horses there in the summer and then I travel essentially from there to and throughout the circuit.
Now, how did you get your start in this game? At what age did you start riding? You do come from an equestrian family?
So no, I didn't come from an equestrian family. I came from a military family. My father was in the Army, and so we moved around quite a bit. And I always had a passion for horses. I had an uncle that lived in St. Louis that was a hobby farmer, but in his spare time, he would buy draft horses from the Amish and just work with them to plow his 5 acres of whatever he wanted to grow that year or 2 years. So I'd go out to visit him and he had done so much work with them. They were so docile. I could walk on their backs while they were eating. And it was just such a fun experience. So I got the horse bug really young. But as far as riding, I actually took my first lesson in a German riding school in a town called Fulda, Germany, where my dad was stationed. I think I might have been 7, 8 years old. And it was one of those situations where you've got an old German riding instructor and these horses would just kind of go in circles as a group and he'd crack the whip and yell at you. And then you'd clean the stall and you brush the feet and you brush the horses down and do the things. And it was super great. But that was my earliest recollection of actually being on a horse. And then my dad was then restationed in Fort Riley, Kansas, which is home of the actual original Cavalry location training center for the Army. And subsequently, all of the cavalry fields were also used as polo fields back in the day. So didn't get into polo then, but just kind of a fun fact. But I started taking lessons doing hunter jumper type riding. And then my mom was watching me take lessons and spending a lot of time out at the barn and she was getting really bored. So she started taking lessons. So at that point, I came from a horse family. So ultimately, we relocated to Washington State when my dad retired and continued riding and doing some 3-day eventing and some hunt club type riding. And then I went off to college and couldn't take a horse with me, let alone take care of myself as a young adult. But I showed up at the Washington State University in Pullman and I saw an ad in the paper that said WSU horse polo tryouts. And I thought, wow, that looks cool. And I showed up, and if you stayed on the horse, you made the team. So as you can imagine, new people getting into polo, it was exciting. It was a new crowd. I really enjoyed the fact that was almost an automatic way to make friends. And, being 5 hours from home, and that was really great to have that experience. And luckily for the program at the time, the men's team all came from polo families. So Pat Dix and Pete Dix out of Spokane, Washington, legends in our part of the world. And they've traveled and played quite a bit of higher goal polo back in their time. I think they were 5 and 6 goals respectively. Their sons both had 2 sets of sons that all played polo and we were all about the same age in college. So my introduction to the sport was with a good foundation of learning the ins and outs of how polo works and with a family that had a good knowledge base around it.
Did you play team sports as a kid and growing up at all?
I didn't actually play a lot of team sports. I was really into the horses. So that was definitely my passion until I got into high school and the horses weren't cool anymore. If you wanted to make more friends. Being a military kid, you moved every 3 years. So it was really hard you made friends and then you'd readjust really quickly. And what do you do next? So I did play soccer and ran track and things like that in high school. And my pony took a back seat for a little bit. And then as soon as I got to college, it all redirected.
Now, some people consider polo to be an action sport. Do you find yourself to be a little bit of an adrenaline junkie?
Oh, absolutely. I think I always say that anyone that even attempts this sport has to have a slight bit of a crazy chip in their brain just to do it.
Couldn't agree with you more.
You put all those people in a room together, and that's why it's so addicting and so fascinating and kind of hard to walk away from, because I don't know of any other community in the world that is so dynamic and fluid that way, with personalities and demographics and you name it, all lumped in one group.
Yeah, I always felt since I got into this sport, people just ask me the type of person that they are, and I said, to be honest with you, I think honestly that people that play this game and get really, really good at it, there's something wrong with them. It's just like people who run Ironmen. There's
Right.
something wrong with you to do that. So, and I mean it in all sincerity, a good way. Now, you actually participate in a lot of outdoor other sports, such as you're a snowboarder as well. Now, did you pick those up at a very young age too?
I did. Again, my mom got into skiing and I was into snowboarding, I think around the age of 10 or 11 when we moved back to Washington. So I did quite a bit of that growing up. And we lived pretty close to one of the ski resorts within a 45-minute drive here. So that was really a good experience to share with my family. And then subsequently, I've been through a lot of different other activities because of that, a little bit of mountain climbing and kind of traveling to other areas to experience new snow.
What's your favorite spot to ride on?
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, it's like picking your favorite child, I suppose. And I really enjoy not sitting in line. And, we have a lot of great places in the Northwest, but everyone knows that. And so, we've got Whistler that's within a 3-hour drive of us. We've got a great hill called Mount Baker, Crystal Mountain, Stevens Pass. I mean, everything's within a 1 to 3 hour drive. So I can't necessarily pick a favorite as far as weather, but in the last year, especially with things kind of being locked down and our options being limited as to, where you could go and where you could recreate, I got into split boarding, which is essentially a snowboard that's split in two. So you can put skins on that board and you can skin up a mountain and you can put the board back together and snowboard down. What it allows you to do is go out into the backcountry and experience a lot of really neat things that you wouldn't necessarily see from a resort.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, no, I'd have to say that's been my new passion a little bit, is kind of getting out a little bit more. But with that, you also have to be very careful about what you're doing.
Yeah.
You don't have people in the resort that can save you if you're out in the backcountry and things go wrong. So you definitely have to educate yourself quite a bit. And so that's what I did. I had a lot of self-education last winter and last fall, just preparing myself to go and do that kind of stuff.
Now, do you have a crew that you go with to trek up those mountains and snowboard?
Yes. So that's another interesting thing, is that the crew that you party with and the crew that you want to go into the backcountry with are usually two different crews. You definitely want to have partners that you trust, that you can communicate well with, and that are pretty level-headed if things go wrong, because things ultimately can go wrong. And that takes time to cultivate who those people are. And you don't really know until you start going on small trips and determining, who you best kind of fit with. But I have a handful of people that I'll go out with, and some have been doing it for years and some have only been doing it for a couple of years, but we're learning from each other. So it's been pretty fun.
Now, going back to your days at Washington State as a polo player, if you can ride a horse, you're on the team. How did you guys do as a team?
We did okay. As a women's team, we never made it to nationals. Our men's team were great. I mean, the boys were all, 1 or 2 goals when they were in school, every single one of them. So I remember going to nationals at Cornell with them as a quote unquote chaperone, which was pretty exciting. But our women's team did okay. I think we may have won regionals my senior year. It was fun. It was fun. All of the girls that were involved had never been exposed to polo before. During my time there, we had barrel racers, we had jumpers, we had a few girls show up that had never ridden before in their lives, and they got on. They fell off every practice, but I'm still friends with them today and I see them riding. So, it was pretty neat.
That is pretty neat. My gosh, it takes a lot of confidence and a lot of determination to, if you have never ridden a horse before, to get up and ride, especially in a sport like polo. So
Sure.
kudos to those girls.
And typically the horses that you're getting in the collegiate system, that some are well-seasoned polo ponies and sometimes they're not. So it definitely takes some gusto to persevere through that. But it was really fun. And then I also spent my summers grooming at the Spokane Polo Club. I mean, I was definitely hooked as soon as I started playing the sport. So that was how I kind of progressed in my polo experience.
Now, what happened after college? Now, how did you continue to play the game, or did you just jump right into your career? I think I read a really great quote. I think it was on uspolo.org's website, where you say, my career choice to pursue sales was driven by my desire to play polo. I knew that if I worked smarter within my profession, that effort would afford me more opportunities to play the sport I loved. Was that your motto after college?
Absolutely. I think when I was getting out of college, the women's professional scene wasn't super strong. And I wasn't as in tune with what Sunny Hill was doing at that moment. I graduated in 01. Obviously, she was making waves and carving a path, but I never even saw a path for being a professional in polo as a female at that point. I also knew I wasn't independently wealthy. I didn't come from a family with a large amount of resources, for me to do this. And I wasn't going to be an attorney or a doctor. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I started looking at people that were in polo that were in sales. And I saw a lot of individuals that, had their strings of polo ponies and they were loving their life and playing all over and they were salespeople. So I kind of emulated that. And that essentially drove me into sales. And then at the time I graduated, I wasn't free anymore, obviously, and I needed to go out into the real world and start this career. And I had a lot of great mentors. I credit, George Dill and Susie Dix for mentoring me a bit in different areas of not only the polo scene, but also, business and thinking, in that direction. I took 5 years and I walked away from the sport completely. For selfish reasons, I didn't even want to be on the pitch, so to speak, if I couldn't play it. Mm-hmm. So I walked away and I focused on my career and I went into a 100% commission sales job, which was the only thing I could get at the time. And of course, if you can sell and be successful on 100% commission, you can pretty much sell anything. So worked my way up through a tech company that was actually based out of Chicago called restaurant.com. And then I kind of hit a bit of a glass ceiling there 3 years in and was looking at other opportunities. And I stumbled upon a gentleman in Southern California that sold slot machines to casinos for a living. And at the time I thought, wow, that's interesting, but somebody has to sell them. Yeah. And so kept in contact and I reached out to him when I was trying to transition. And, the biggest thing is networking with anything. And I said, I don't know if you remember me, but I remember, you really loved what you did. You worked from home and it looked like you were pretty successful at it. And I'd love to know more about what you do. And that was a really scary thing for me to ask, but he immediately reached back out and said, yeah, I absolutely remember you. By the way, we have a position open in Arizona for the Southwest. Send me your resume. So within a 3-week period, I was selling slot machines to casinos and tribal casinos all over the Southwest. And that lasted almost 10 years.
I got to assume that there's a demand. That's but not just to sell them, but also to fix them. I mean, technology has clearly progressed.
Absolutely. And it was hardware, software. So there was an element of actual tech to it. Mm-hmm. But I really was able to cut my teeth in that world. And it also afforded me the luxury of getting back into polo. So I think it was in 2005 or 6, I did what you're not supposed to do. And I went on Craigslist and I found myself a horse. Wow. And it was a 8-year-old gelding, raced in the Prescott racetrack 3 times, came in dead last 3 times. They called him Last Chance. And a lady had bought him and she was moving cows on this horse. And she just had too many horses. And so she was, kind of fire selling some of them. And I went out to Prescott, Arizona. I was living in Scottsdale at the time. And I went out there and I got on him and he was super handy and he neck reined already. And I thought, I can make this horse a polo pony.
Wait, so the pony was a racetrack horse. He was a thoroughbred?
Yeah.
And he went from that to a cattle ranch horse? Or
essentially, yes.
Essentially that?
Yep.
Well, obviously there's where the horse probably gained its agility.
Exactly.
And then transferred into polo. Well, that is a fun career path for a horse.
And you know what? I say it's not the right way to go, especially when you don't have a clue and you're not a polo trainer. But I really got lucky with this particular horse. Now, subsequent ones, different story. But this guy was great. He really took to polo. He loved it. We started in the arena in Arizona, and then we played field, and he traveled all around the country with me through a few career moves, and he's retired on my parents' farm now. So that was a great first experience. But from there, I picked up another one, and then I moved out to St. Louis, Missouri, and that's where another milestone, I suppose I could say, would be with my polo journey. My relationship with the Dix family led me to Steve Orthwine Sr. and the Orthwine family. And I think if I recall, Pat Dix made a phone call to Steve and said, hey, this gal worked for us for 3 or 4 years, and she's really into polo, really eager to learn. And she's just kind of getting back into it and starting to play outdoors again. And with that, Steve Sr. kind of took me under his wing, gave me a place up in the top hill of his property to keep my 2 horses. And I got to start practicing with them. And it was a really great experience because of that.
Now, did you switch careers at that point too, or jobs, or no?
So I was in the gaming industry for almost 10 years. So at that point, I was still, I had essentially relocated to the Midwest, and I was covering Iowa and parts of Missouri. Same stuff, just different territory. So it just kind of moved that way. And I had those polo connections from years ago, and I took full advantage of the people that helped me along the way and appreciated that and networked through them.
Now, I grew up in Wisconsin, just outside Milwaukee. Was Potawatomi part of your clientele?
It was not, but I am very familiar with Potawatomi.
Ho Chunk Casino, that's another one.
Yeah.
I went to Wisconsin, Milwaukee, so a lot of my friends went to Marquette, and Potawatomi was like where you go when the bar's closed.
Right. Yeah. And the Northwest is heavily influenced by the Native American culture, and a lot of our towns and cities are all tribal nomenclatures. So Enumclaw being one of them, and Seattle.
So what's next after St. Louis then?
So within that industry, I moved back to the Southwest a few years later, and I had a brief stint playing in Arizona again, and then moved back to the Northwest. And that was I think I moved back in 2011. And at that point, I had 4 horses, one on the verge of retirement, but I never had that full string that everyone that I was surrounding myself with had. I was kind of piecemealing it together. But once I got to Washington, I was able to kind of start building and focusing on that. And a lot of that came from the things I learned from the people I met back in the Midwest. And of course, I had an opportunity to go out to Port Mayaca while I was in St. Louis during the winter when they were first doing their first Tabooey Cup, which is their women's tournament now, but that was their first annual one. 2010, I think, 2009. And I had the opportunity to meet some of these female pros. I played with Jillian Johnston. I met Kieran Reese. I met Cecilia Cochran. I met some really great ladies that I got their contacts and said, I'd really love to play more polo and go more international with this. And so by doing that, I was able to make some really good contacts. So when I got back to Washington, I started coordinating some trips with some other women polo players and getting out into the world a little more.
I apologize if we got too much into the life trajectory of Sheryl Sick here, but you kind of highlight something beautiful about the sport of polo, and it's the camaraderie that's out there. And a lot of these people helped you along your way, not with your career path, with the sport, you name it. Everyone was just kind of has an open arms to each other. And that's kind of one thing that I've always enjoyed about polo is despite the affluent lifestyle that is attached to the game, I find that a lot of the people who play the game are incredibly humble. They're experts within their industry, but at the end of the day, you're going to find these people in blue jeans drinking a Coors Light. At the end of the day, champagne and seersucker don't even exist. And if I'm hitting that spot on, let me know, or if I'm not.
No, you absolutely are spot on. When I run into people outside of the polo community, they're like, oh, you play polo. Wow, that sounds fancy.
Yeah.
And I'm really quick to correct them.
Yes.
Although sometimes I'm like, maybe I shouldn't correct them. Let them figure it out. But yeah. I'm really quick to correct them that no, it's more beer and barbecue style. We do, fancy charity type events on occasion, but that's not our everyday. And for the most part, it's, people out there going and having fun, and we have a beer or we barbecue asado after the fact. And you get to meet people from all over the country and the world. And it's a very reciprocal sport in that regard. And so I do find myself politely explaining that it's not as fancy as Pretty Woman or the movies as they might have in their head.
You're right. And I don't even acknowledge the stereotypes for the men. Like that sells itself. Like, if that's how your perception of it, fine. That's awesome. I do find myself correcting, but I almost kind of say like there's two worlds of polo in a way. There's those guys that are in the corner that are ready to play, and there's you on the sidelines. But I love how you use the term beer and barbecue, and that's really, really true. Being from Wisconsin, we love our craft beer. We love our barbecue. We love our cheese. We're big sports, Big Ten, that sort of thing. That's where I gravitated to once I learned that was there. Because, there's nothing better than sitting back and having a Coors Grenade, a bottle with your fellow polo players and patrons. That's for sure. I love your career path and kind of where people take you, because you really embody Churchill's quote of your handicap is your passport throughout the world.
Absolutely.
But you kind of add an additional layer. Your polo handicap is your entry into a great social life for meeting friends and great people and traveling the world and traveling around the country, that sort of thing. So I really love the fact that you kind of dived into your career path and how that aligned with your polo path as well. Now, you're in Seattle, you're in the back in the Northwest. What was that progression then going into the role of circuit governor? I mean, that's a big role to play.
It is. It absolutely is. And I can tell you, when I was approached on the idea, my first reaction was no. To be very candid, I thought to myself, I just want to be a sole contributor here, take care of myself, have fun. It seemed like a lot. And George Dill, who was our circuit governor for 11 years and a very good friend of ours, who had also taken over for George's role and elected as a circuit governor, Robert Peterson, actually was the circuit governor. And unfortunately, he passed away, and it was very sad. And he'd been a very great polo patron and person in our community for 30 plus years. He's who welcomed me back with open arms when I moved back to Washington and gave me a place to keep my horses and traveling with him and his group. And my hat's off to him for that. But after that happened, I was approached by George, and I have a long-standing relationship with George. I did some grooming for him. I think I was, if anybody knows George still, he's quite the character in our community. He's been all over, but I think I was groom number 2. And I think he's probably had 67 since. But he saw something in me, apparently, that I was capable of doing this type of a role. I like to travel. I like to get out. I don't like to be in one spot too long. I think that's because of my military roots a little bit. Mm-hmm. I tend to blend in and get to know people pretty easily, again, because of what I had to do as a kid. So after some thought and a little bit of George calling the USPA and already telling them I was interested, I was put into the position as circuit governor for the first term. So since then, it's been an amazing journey. I've embraced it more than I ever thought I would. Essentially, my job is to be a liaison for the clubs and new players coming into the sport and just welcoming them, right? And making them feel comfortable. And we all know it can be super intimidating for new people, whether they know how to ride or they don't know how to ride, or, they're realizing the investment that it takes to put into it. I think having my perspective and just being a sounding board for people has been a good thing. So I definitely went a 180 from the day George Dill called me and asked me to do it to today. And I just started my second term as an elected circuit governor in July.
This podcast episode is presented by the Gay Polo League. The Gay Polo League is the only LGBTQ polo organization in the world that is dedicated to producing high-end LGBTQ polo events and experiences. Its mission is to inspire and empower those individuals who identify themselves as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender via the promotion of and participation in the sport of polo. The GPL promotes the sport of polo to provide equality, pride, inclusion, and confidence for those individuals who face discrimination simply due to identifying themselves as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or other non-traditional sexual or gender identities. GPL works to create an atmosphere that affirms and supports the understanding and acceptance of all individuals regardless of race, sex, or sexual identity, and works to promote goodwill and camaraderie in the community. Its ongoing goal is to raise money at GPL events to help LGBTQ organizations better serve their communities. Our battle cry is, the slightest difference makes all the difference. GPL is changing perceptions in the LGBT community, athletics, and society at large, one chucker at a time. In 2022, the GPL was awarded the Champion of Equity and Diversity in Sports, awarded by the Palm Beach County Sports Commission. We invite you to join us. For more information about the organization, its events, and how to donate, please visit www.gaypolo.com. Now, what are some of the issues that are affecting the Pacific Northwest? What are some of the clubs struggling with, if at all, struggling with anything?
Well, up until COVID, the pandemic kicking in, the struggle has always been growing and retaining members, right? You've got a discretionary income sport that people make a living off of, right? So you've got your patrons, you've got your people getting into the sport that aren't necessarily a full-on patron, but they still want to have fun. They want to play, but they may not be fielding an entire team. They may not have 12 ponies. And then you've got your professionals and your grooms that are all mixed into this mix. And I think maintaining a balance there, I think, is a challenge for a lot of clubs, especially the smaller clubs. If they don't have a strong patron base, you kind of have to navigate the local scene and try to create tournaments when you don't have a lot of money to create tournaments with, right? Because people need to get paid. That's, they're doing it for a living. So I think that's been a challenge. But with the dynamic with what happened over the last year and a half is, everyone was so cooped up in home that all of a sudden the desire to go out and try more outdoor activities increased. And we've seen an influx. And I think a lot of clubs across the country have seen more polo being played than ever in the last 2 summers. And I would have contributed a lot of it to that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of silver lining to this whole entire COVID thing that polo benefited from, not just from new players entering the sport, but also even from an event perspective and giving people the opportunity to get outside and enjoy hanging out with their friends in a safe and social distance environment. I know up here in Chicago, we are like one of like 2 outdoor sports you could enjoy last summer. And we milked it big time and bragged about it. I mean, I remember having to educate political officials and the health department as to what tailgating in polo was, because their initial thought was like as if I was going into a parking lot and tailgating at a Chicago Bears game. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Like it's slightly different. And, it's like you can literally drive up to the field. That is your reserved seat. You don't even have to cross paths with anyone else unless you have to go to the bathroom. That's it. And after 3 phone calls, it was greenlit and, sold out almost every single event. And I know a lot of other clubs have had that success too. And we actually started our academy 2 years ago, but last year, it's like gangbusters. A bunch of people are coming out. The only thing to do.
Yeah, and I think it's great that what's transpired with the Chicago Polo Association, we ask about challenges within the sport and clubs. I think that type of a program where, you've got a variety of club owners, field owners, somewhat coming together to try and share resources, I think is a great example of what maybe more areas of the country could do. I would like to see maybe more of that happening in the Pacific Northwest, at least in the, the areas where the clubs are within a 5-hour radius of each other, coming together to potentially share resources. Now, that's also easier said than done.
Yeah.
With club owners and individuals, a lot of those are also very successful business owners, and they have their ways of thinking and doing things, and their vision may not be the same as the guy down the street. But I think it's great to see that it's working somewhere, right? So I commend the folks in Chicago and yourself for trying to grow that dynamic.
I really appreciate that. And we still encounter our challenge. It's still an evolving ecosystem that we've created up here. And yeah, it's a great example of what other areas definitely can do. That's for sure. So, I mean, we all have to work together in order for this sport to work. We really do. There's times where clubs obviously might be suffering one particular year. How can other clubs help them out just to keep the industry afloat? Well, what's that common quote that people say, rising tides float all boats? Is that how it works?
I think so.
But what are some of your goals as circuit governor for your circuit?
So the first 3 years was really me getting to know the clubs and their dynamics, right? And with our region being so spread out, that involved a lot of travel, and which I embrace 100%. And yes, I do put all my horses in a trailer and pretty much go everywhere with them. So they are definitely road warriors. But I think for the next 3 years, I'd really like to kind of hone in on some of those clubs that are really trying to make a difference. I think it's always a struggle at any level to try to grow this sport and these groups and maintain. But, one of the things I really took a lot of pride in last weekend, for example, is I went out to Montana State, or Bozeman, Montana, amazing place, and went to the Montana State University of Idaho polo match. And these kids haven't been able to play a competitive match in a year because of the school restrictions.
Mhm.
And it was great. There were 30 kids out there. There was varsity JV. One school has a coach, one school doesn't, but every single one of those kids did amazing. And I think maybe two out of the 30 came from a polo background. The rest all just were introduced the same way I was. And they're so passionate. I always love to ask new people, what got you in? How did you get introduced? And every single one of them said, oh, I saw an ad, or my friend told me, but I just came out here and everyone was so nice. Everyone was so nice to me. And I just thought that was really neat to hear from a brand new person that's so excited about what they're doing. And that excitement is super infectious. And so I think focusing on the people that are really excited to grow the sport, because those are the ones that need the resources and the time devoted, I think, to them to kind of try and see what else can we do to get more going here. So I like to use a good example, Vancouver Polo Club. Vancouver had a polo club years and years ago, and it went defunct. And I think it was defunct for probably 40 years-ish. And a group of dads were out at a jumper clinic watching their daughters, and somebody said, hey, there's a polo match going on. And so they all went, and they all decided to take lessons. And these guys all have a fair amount of resources at their discretion. And now there's a Vancouver Polo Club 4 or 5 years later, and their excitement was so infectious. I think they've got 20, 25 members in a matter of 3 or 4 years because they didn't know what they didn't know, and they were so excited about it. So my goal is to focus on, the individuals in the sport that are still fired up about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And if they're not, find out why. And if there's anything I can do to help, try and tackle that too.
Is there anything that you would like to see clubs do more of than what they're doing now?
I think with it's just really been in the last probably 3 years that I see clubs utilizing social media to an extent. I'm pretty active on social media, and I've been for a while, but it's a free tool and you can really do a lot of things with it. And there's people that have a profession now around taking care of your social media. But, there's a lot of young kids out there that are on their Instagrams and their TikToks and all those things every day that, if they're excited about polo, utilizing, those resources to help you really market, because I think that's the way to reach another demographic these days. So I'd like to see, more clubs really diving into that, because I think it works. And there's a lot of different things you can do with it, promotional wise.
You're right. This past year, I think we utilized more social media and PR than we did with traditional advertising, and our attendance went through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's certain social media platforms that I know are just still catered to maybe an older demographic.
Yeah.
Facebook, one of them. But Instagram, for example, caters much more to it. So to your point, I do highly encourage clubs to really wrap their head around it, even if that means hiring an individual
Sure.
or someone within college that has a level of knowledge of this, because social media does take time. There's a lot of platforms up there. There's a lot of graphics and things like that you can use to engage your spectators, your fans, your members, and so on and so forth. And not to mention, polo is highly visual.
Right.
Great visual. The photography, the events, the spectators, it's so lively. And when you can do it right, I mean, you're going to attract a lot of people. That's for sure.
I would also say that clubs utilizing their immediate community a bit more too.
Mm-hmm.
One of the neatest things I ever went to was St. Louis. There was an event at, I believe it was Crafting Field, which was Billy Bush's facility that he had built out there. And they did an event where it was every Friday night, and everybody from the community was invited, and they did a theme tailgate, and it was a competition. So the community really got into it, right? So I think the time I went out there, it was a Mardi Gras theme. So, you got 100 cars lined up, Friday night event. Everybody's decked out, doing their tailgating. Whoever the best tailgate got a bottle of champagne or something. But it really brought the community together. But I think it also created an excitement around that where they found new membership that way. But in addition to that, the match was an event that they based around the police department and the fire department. So one team wore red, the other team wore blue. Police and fire department were out there. And, I think they charged $10 a car, whatever it was. And everybody wants to support their local first responders. They want to support the people that help other people. And I think that's really important. And I think it gets people riled up. And it also creates community support for what you're doing. And it doesn't make the club look like an outsider, in a sense. So I think that's another thing that a lot of clubs could do is really tie back into their immediate community and get people involved, because just by default, I always say it, like, my intentions aren't altruistic. I don't want to play polo by myself. So the more people we can get going and playing in the sport, we'll never be alone on the polo field.
Yeah. You do hit on a very important topic, and that is local municipality engagement, working with your local government officials, telling people that you're there at the end of the day. And polo is so unique, is such a draw. And a lot of local municipalities can hang their hat on that. And sometimes, for the most part, we still get it here in Chicago that, oh my God, I didn't even know polo existed, despite the high profile that we are within the sport and the proximity that we are to downtown Chicago. We're 17 miles straight out west. We're close to a major metropolitan market, but we still get that response. We work with, the DuPage County and Visitors Bureau, which is, the county that we're in. That's pretty much what they do for tourism. And we are all over their marketing efforts to drive people here, because out of every single thing, with all the townships that were within their county, we stand out the most as being the most attractive. So at the end of the day, they know that brings people in from out of state, other towns, people eat at their restaurants, people stay at their hotels, and so on and so forth. Suddenly, they're benefiting from it economically. So for those of you who are listening, please, I know it's political, which sucks because sometimes you got to shake your tin cup, but regardless, at the end of the day, I highly encourage making those relationships, because they can really benefit you in the long run.
Absolutely.
So what are you doing outside of your circuit mostly? Are you involved in women's polo? Are you traveling to other circuits, playing in tournaments, and so on and so forth? You're outdoor 3 handicap and indoor 4. So I would assume that you're kind of in demand, are you not?
So now that travel has opened up over the last year, I've certainly taken full advantage of that. I get antsy if I'm sitting in my own state for more than 3 weeks at a time. I did have the opportunity to go and play with the Denver Polo Club this summer. And typically in the summer, again, because the circuit is so big and we didn't really have access to getting into Canada. So going through Wyoming, I went to Denver and played in the women's tournament there, which was super fun. A lot of great gals in that part of the country. And so I got to do that. And then starting to make plans for international travel. Prior to everything shutting down, I actually had a trip to Thailand to play in a women's tournament over there on February 13th of 2020. And I think on February 1st, we had a company-wide email advising us not to travel. So prior to that, I did Australia, New Zealand, Ireland. I've been all over, and super fun. And you meet people in one country and then they invite you to the next one. So that was great. So this next few months, I'll probably go down to California. We do like to get some sunshine when we're stuck in the rain in Seattle this time of year. A lot going on this year at El Dorado Polo Club. So there's a women's tournament happening then. And I love mixed polo too. I'm not necessarily one or the other, but I find that in women's polo, it creates a little more ease of travel and opportunities. So I'll also be heading to Jamaica, which is also a great group as well. I've been there a couple times, and they're going to be playing in February. So just starting to make those plans, but it's super exciting to even have the privilege to do it again.
Oh, I'll say Jamaica's a good time.
Yeah.
That's a fun crew down there.
For sure. Absolutely. If you ever get down to the Kingston Polo Club, you have to dance on their small little table that I think the record is 28 people that have stood on this thing at one time. But they are a great, hospitable group and really nice horses too.
Yes.
On that island. Very nice mounts. But in between that, I'll definitely be hitting the mountains.
I'm all too familiar with that table as well.
Okay.
I think there might
It's
be a video
legendary.
circulating. Yes, exactly. That's fantastic. Are you part of any committee with the USPA?
I am. I sit on the board and staff committee, and we help with advising on issues with, as it states, board and staff and human resources type projects. And that's a great committee. That was the first committee I was asked to be on. And, I think it's great to be a part of some of these committees at the USPA. A lot of times I don't think the greater polo community realizes all the inner workings of what happens at the USPA. I think they see a lot of just surface level of rules changes and mandates coming down. I always encourage any member to get involved in that. Any type of committee, whatever you're passionate about, get involved. Your eyes will be wide open after that.
That's for damn sure. I'm glad you mentioned that because, I worked in mainstream sports before polo, and I tell everyone, I'm like, my gosh, the hardest of any job I had to have been with the USPA. There's no question about it.
Yes. Yeah.
It made me grow and everything. Despite you're in mainstream sports, you have 10-person, 20-person teams that are helping you out with marketing campaigns and things like that. You were by yourself, if not had maybe one or two.
Right. And really everyone that's involved is doing it for the love of the sport. And I always remind people they are all volunteers and everyone has their opinions, and it's great to have them all. And it has created change. I've seen a lot of change over the last 3 years at the USPA, and some of it's been positive. Some of it hasn't been super great, but again, it's an organization made up of volunteers that are all passionate about the same thing. And then I also sit on the Polo Development Committee. So working with that committee to essentially grow the sport of polo and help member clubs with funding and requests in that regard. I also sit on a lot of the other committee meetings when they do happen. So I'm more in tune with what's going on across the board than I ever have been. So it's been good.
What were some of the highlights from the fall meeting?
Well, I counted in the room. I believe we now have 5 female board members, which I believe that's a record. And that's exciting to see. And a lot of junior board members coming on board. I think that experience and wisdom, but also youth and excitement is important to kind of shake things up. And I'm seeing a lot of that happening with the boards transitioning. To me, that was kind of special to see. And also, we haven't sat down in person in almost 2 years. Everything's been a Zoom meeting. The last couple board meetings were 7-hour Zoom meetings, if you can imagine that. Oh. So that's tough. And so I think when you get together in person again, get to collaborate, a lot of really positive things happen. All of the committees were on point as far as, what they were trying to do. And I think the leadership in place right now at the USPA is a positive as well. And just kind of getting to know them a little bit where I didn't get that opportunity over the last year and a half.
For those who are listening that might not be polo players, if you were to summarize it in just a few sentences and you're talking to a novice or someone who might want to get into the sport, what would you say to them and as to why they should get in?
It's the most fun on grass. That should be few enough words.
The fewest words I think I've ever gotten.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a no-brainer. If you get on and you get a little bit excited about it, go for it. It's a community and you're never alone. Well, you're never alone unless you choose to be, but it'll take you anywhere and as far as you want it to go. I also like to let people know, listen to multiple people in the sport because, again, everyone has different perspectives. I recommend don't getting too siloed into one. Try to pick everyone's brain because you're going to get a lot of different things thrown at you coming into the sport new. And whether that's financially, whether that's your skills, whether that's horses or how to hire a pro or how to buy a horse or all those things, I think it's really important to pick a lot of brains in the sport. So that's more of a anecdotal advice for new people. But I just say it's the most fun on grass and you just got to get on and hang on and be willing to learn.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Those are great parting words, Cheryl. And I really appreciate you joining me on this podcast. I'm going to keep on following on Instagram and be constantly jealous of all your hiking, snowboarding, and everything that you do. And for those listening, I highly encourage you to follow Cheryl. She is an amazing woman. She's a trailblazer in our sport. So I'm so thrilled to have you on here and joining me. And I cannot wait to see you again. And please, if you can, maybe encourage to get a women's team together and come out for our 100th anniversary here in Oak Brook.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I'd love to go back to Oak Brook. That was a great experience the last time. It's been a pleasure, Danny. And don't threaten me with a good time. I will take you up on it.
Excellent. Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
This April, the sporting world will be celebrating a momentous milestone as the Lexus International Gay Polo Tournament, presented by Douglas Elliman, returns for its 12th year from April 6th through the 10th. The International Gay Polo Tournament was founded in 2010, and the event has grown in popularity, creativity, and impact, with nearly 3,000 players, attendees, and merrymakers from around the world attending the event annually. The event was created to generate awareness and to move the needle forward for LGBTQ athletes, and to ensure athletes not only have the same opportunities, but also have a safe place to learn, grow, and excel in their sport. Since its inception, the priority has remained to raise a significant amount of money in support of diversity and inclusion initiatives for other LGBTQ organizations. Since becoming a 501c3 organization, the GPL has donated over $30,000 to organizations such as Compass Youth Program and SAGE. This year's event will benefit One Pulse Foundation, an organization born after the tragic events that unfolded at Pulse nightclub, where 49 people lost their lives in 2016. One Pulse Foundation's mission is to create a sanctuary and build a national LGBTQ museum to honor the victims. This year's event will be marked with a full slate of activities and will celebrate with fun, fashion, and of course, polo. The 5 days of festivities will come to a head in a majestic match only rivaled by the creative competitions from the tailgaters when the event returns to the International Polo Club Palm Beach in Wellington, Florida. To learn more about this year's event and to purchase tickets, please visit www.gaypolo.com. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to seeing you at this year's must-attend event. Now we have reached the part of the show where we address outside the board's issues affecting the sport of polo, with the sharing of insights, ideas, and best practices towards solving everyday marketing, branding, and sponsorship problems, avoiding bad habits, or helping to navigate through new trends and how to best leverage those opportunities. Hi everyone, Danny O'Leary here, and hope you guys enjoyed episode 3 of our season 2 Outside the Boards podcast. On this episode of Insights, I wanted to talk a little bit about group options versus individual ticket options. So I wanted to bring this up because I wanted to share some insights as to what we learned, I want to say, in the past 2 seasons, ever since COVID and the pandemic hit, and how we had to alter our venue layout. Now, prior to 2020 and 2018 and 2019, individual ticket actually did relatively well. A lot of people were buying individual lawn seat, general admission, VIP tickets, and what have you. But as we learned, even from those days, we noticed that about 2.5 to 1 for each purchase transaction, meaning that for every person who purchased a ticket, they were buying for 2 or at most 3 people at the end of the day. So it was relatively indicated that it's a group outing sort of thing. Now, going into 2020, we had to alter our entire ticket operations as well as our venue operations to an all tailgate atmosphere in order to comply with the state's social distancing recommendations and in policy and so on and so forth that we're all suffering during the whole entire pandemic in 2020. Things obviously opened up in 2021, and we learned a lot from 2020 because we wanted to institute a lot of things that worked that year, and one of them was tailgating. So we included a lot of tailgating options in our 2021 season. And also we decided to open up a little bit more reserve tables and things like that as well than what we had in previous years. And it actually paid off. However, we still kept a significant amount of individual seating options. And what we learned, and a lot of this probably has to do with the whole pandemic, since we did receive a lot of great publicity during that year, and it was obviously a lot of silver lining to it, but group ticket orders increase at the end of the day to the point of close to increasing by, I want to say 50%. So at the end of the day, every transaction was about 3.5 to 1 at the end of the day. And more, all of our group options that we had available prior to a match were selling out far quicker than any other individual ticket or receipt. So we saw a relatively significant decline in individual tickets versus group tickets. And even though the fact that we did an incredible job and hitting a lot of financial goals in terms of ticket sales, we saw where people were gravitating towards at the end of the day. Though individuals who had purchased individual tickets were now gravitating towards reserved table seating, our tailgate options, which we increased our amenities and the look and feel of the environment and the overall experience that were people getting versus years past. So at the end of the day, we realized that we probably need to focus on more group ticket purchases at the end of the day, whether that be expanding reserved table seating, whether that be tent options, tailgate options on both sidelines, things like that, to make it readily available for those individuals who want to at least maybe buy 2 tickets to 4 tickets at a time. And obviously there's some cost efficiencies there rather than individual tickets. But we'll still have that individual ticket option just in case. But we are looking to move to a group environment overall. And that changes things. We're not probably going to invest in grandstand seating anymore and tip down seating and things like that. Things that are clearly endemic to the sports world, whether you go to a Wrigley baseball game with the Cubs or the Sox here in Chicago, anywhere, football, baseball, you name it. So polo offers a very different and unique atmosphere that is much more social at the end of the day. So you're mixing and mingling with friends or people that you never heard of, but you obviously share the same lifestyle interests. So there's something to be said there. So I'm pretty sure all of you work with some type of ticket transaction group like Eventbrite or Simple Tix or Thunder Tix and what have you. There's a number of them that are out there. And some of the bigger ones at the end of the day have a lot of means of filtering and collecting data to show analytics behind the success of an event. So I encourage you to take a look at those analytics. I was able to find some very, very unique details going back to 2016 over the course of time, even with Eventbrite. Eventbrite does have some sophisticated analytics that you're able to pull and extract and compare them to other years at the end of the day. It's something that we did, and we were able to find a lot of insights that are directing us as to where to go for this coming year. I encourage you all to take a look at that to see what certain purchase behavior trends are going on within the polo world, especially after coming out of a pandemic. The cultural impact that things like that pandemic has had has shaken up a little bit of the ticketing that we've had at the Oakbrook Polo Club. So it's something worthy of taking a look into. And I'm sure some of you have probably even seen these trends from about 30,000 feet. But to take it a next step further, look at the analytics from your ticket transaction third parties and vendors that you work with and see if the trends are true at the end of the day. And you'll also be able to see where people have maybe migrated from individual tickets to group tickets at the end of the day. We clearly saw the difference between where people were clearly migrating towards and staying there for that matter. So with that said, it's helped us put a very comprehensive plan going into our 2022 season. Again, highly encourage you. So there's some insights between group options and individual ticket options. Common perception and stereotype is to think that individual tickets, such as what the success of other sporting has done, versus polo. Polo is highly different. It is a very, very social and group atmosphere, and it continues to prove that year after year, more so coming out of a pandemic. So there's some insights for everyone. If you're looking at redoing your ticket strategy or looking to experiment with other options, it's coming from me, from personal experience, what we're doing at our club, and see how we ultimately can continue to grow, generate more ticket sales, more attendance, and so on and so forth by appeasing to people's social interests at the end of the day. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy. That was a great episode. What is the one thing you learned from today's conversation? If this episode had an impact on you in some way, then I encourage you to visit and subscribe to our website at outsidetheboards.com for more episodes and interviews with incredible guests. Thanks for stopping by, my friends, and hope to see you on the polo field.